Welcome to the Candle Business Coach Podcast, a show about the craft of candle making and small business. I'm your host, Kirsty Allen, and I'm a candle maker, mum of three, and kindness advocator. Join me as I dive into all things candles and small business and deliver advice and tips to you in episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Are you on the list to get my daily motivation emails? Every day I'll send you a message that is designed to help keep you focused on taking action toward your goals. Sign up using the link in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by my free ebook, The Candle Business Marketing Kickstarter Kit. Inside this free ebook, you'll learn to identify your blocks of time to dedicate to your candle business. Plus, there are several tips and tricks for re-engaging past customers and attracting new customers into your business so you can grow your business and reach your goals. Check out the link in the show notes for your copy. Welcome back to the podcast, my friend. I hope you're having a beautiful day and are looking forward to another episode of the Candle Business Coach podcast. Now, today's episode is a really, really important one as it relates to the process of actually testing your candles. But before we get into that, I just wanted to remind you that if you haven't already, I would love it if you would leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, just with your comments and feedback on the podcast. And then if you have any other suggestions on what you'd like to see in future episodes, you can always DM me on Instagram at Candle Business Coach. Okay, so let's get started with today's episode. So what does it actually mean when we say we need to test our candles? So the point of testing candles is to make sure that they burn safely, first and foremost, that they perform well over their lifespan, and of course, smell amazing if you choose to use fragrance oil. Now, testing candles is really just as simple as making a candle and then burning it and taking notes on its performance. And during the testing phase, your goal is to determine whether the candle is wicked correctly. So a candle is properly wicked if it meets all of the following criteria. The flame is approximately 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters tall. The flame burns smoothly without excessive flickering. The wax is able to melt across the entire surface of the container, and that's what we call a melt pool. When fully melted, that melt pool is between 0.5 inch to about 1.2 centimeters deep. The temperature of your container is not too hot to touch or to hold. The flame does not produce excessive smoke or soot, and as the candle burns, it doesn't leave excess wax clinging to the sides of the container. Now, before testing your candles, you need to decide on what wax and candle type you want to use and then stick with that choice. By removing these two major factors from the equation means less candle testing overall, and yet if you have no idea what wax or container you want to use, you might end up overwhelming yourself. So it's important to decide on what type of wax you want for your entire product line and then decide what sort of container you want to use with that wax. So my advice is always to start small. Think big, but start small. Use one type of container or one type of jar or vessel and then perfect that before moving on to another one. Otherwise, as I said, you'll end up overwhelming yourself with too many decisions or too many choices and lots of testing. So what are the actual steps to test your candles? Let's go through them one by one so that you could follow this process and know what's required to actually test your candles. Number one, you want to select the wax, fragrance, and container you ultimately plan on using for your candle line, which I mentioned before. Number two, prepare that container with a wick that is appropriate for that jar size. Number three, label the jar with the notes about the fragrance used, the fragrance percentage load, the wax that you used, and the wick size and type. This will help keep track of your results. Number four, then prepare the candle wax and fragrance as per your normal process of making candles, then pour your tester. It's helpful to follow the exact same process, including the temperature you added the fragrance at and the temperature you poured at, so that you can repeat your results accurately. And this is the hard part. Number five, you need to let your candle cure for at least 24 hours, but for the most accurate results, you want to wait at least 2 weeks or about 2 weeks. Number six is to gather your testing supplies. So it's helpful to have a laser thermometer and a timer. You can just use the clock app on your phone. Having a notebook or device handy for jotting down notes about your results is really important too. The next step, number 7, is to light your tester candle. So start the timer on your phone so you can keep track of your candle's progress over time. Number 8 is make note of the container temperature, the melt pool size, the melt pool depth, the flame height, the scent throw, and any other relevant factors that you need to write down. For the most accurate comparison, you want to make sure that you're checking your candle about once every hour and jotting down your observations. And then number 9, let your candle burn for 2 to 4 hours and then extinguish it. Now, if your candle appears to be burning well with the wick you chose, you can complete additional burns of that same candle to determine how the candle will perform over its life, but make sure you let the candle completely cool and have the melt pool completely reset before starting a new burning session. And the other point I wanted to make is if you don't get the results you're looking for, you'll need to make additional tester candles with different sized wicks and then repeat these steps with each candle, comparing your results as you go. Now, it's really important that you label and record everything that you do because, to be honest, you're not going to remember everything. And if you've got quite a few fragrances in your product line and you're testing each of the fragrances and you need to determine the fragrance load for each candle, it's going to take a lot of your memory to try and even attempt to remember those things. But not only that, you actually need to have your notes written down, whether that's on a digital notepad or just a piece of paper and pen or a notebook for insurance purposes. Now, this does vary across the different countries, so you'll need to do some research and see what's the most appropriate form of documentation for where you live, or get in touch with your insurance company and check where and what they require if a claim is made. So taking good notes is crucial to understanding 2 things. Number 1, what you did, and number 2, what you need to do. So your experience and professional aptitude as a candle maker will fill in the gaps between number 1 and number 2. And over time, you'll learn how to interpret your process, the conditions, and the test results to build a plan that will work moving forward. In the meantime, you need to record literally everything you can. And if you're lost about where to start, split your notes into 3 sections: the container specs, the wax details, and then your testing notes. So I want to run through a few things that you need to consider when you're conducting your tests. So when we think about the candle itself, we want to look at the wax type that we've used, the wick type and size, so whether it's cotton or wood and what series it's from, so whether it's a CDN or if it's a PCS wick or if it's a different wick type, you need to write down which type of wick you've used, what fragrance you used, the percentage of your fragrance, if you used any additives, the container material, and the container diameter, because the type of material you use, whether it's ceramic or concrete or if it's a tin, they will perform differently. And of course, the diameter of the container will also impact the burn of the candle. So you also want to look at the pouring notes. So what was the date that you did the pour? What was the room temperature? What was the wax heated to? When did you add the fragrance? So which temperature? The pouring temperature, any observations from the pour, and then the amount of curing time between when you've poured the candle and then when you've lit it for the first time. So you need to take into account the date, the time that it was burned, the room temperature, as I said, and then we need to look at the flame height, the melt pool size, and the temperature of the container, in addition to all the other aspects I've mentioned just before. So you may be wondering how to get consistent results when testing your candles. And that's a really good point, because we want to make sure that we're doing this quality control to make sure that the candles, again, are not only safe for the end user, but that they're performing at their very best. So to ensure you get reliable results, you want to repeat every aspect of the test under the same conditions. So if you can, make sure you're burning in the same location and keep the temperature the same as well. Changes to the environment can affect how your tester candles perform. And if you're burning multiple tester candles at once, make sure that they're not too close to each other. You want to leave about 10 to 15 centimeters each jar apart so that the burns don't impact one another with the residual heat. Now, for those that have yet to make any candles or they're in the early testing phase, what you'll want to do is find your baseline wick before adding anything else. So every component of a candle impacts the safety and performance of that candle in some way. For example, too much fragrance can clog the wick, or an improperly sized wick can snuff itself out or grow to unsafe proportions. Once you select a candle type for your candle, it's unlikely to change behavior, but the same is not true for wax. You cannot build an intelligent foundation for your candle design if you don't understand how the wax works by itself in your chosen container. So before you go off and start experimenting with different fragrances and possibly colors, you need to perform safety tests just with the wax and just with the container to know exactly which wick works in it. Don't add fragrance or color at this stage. You want to burn the wax all the way from the top until the end of the candle or until the wick fails. And remember that adding anything more to your candle complicates the entire system. So it's crucial that you're able to identify the root cause of why the candle testing failed. And when we test without the fragrance or the color, it means we can identify what happened with the wick in our chosen wax. So it's also important to retest new lots of wax to confirm your previous testing. In a perfect world, wax wouldn't change, but unfortunately the nature of wax development means that there's occasionally enough difference in the final raw candle wax, and you need to make sure you're doing your testing thoroughly. So every time you receive a new batch of wax from a different lot, best practice suggests that you create a candle using your baseline wick and make sure it still performs like you expect. If it does, that's fine. You can carry on with your candle production. But if it doesn't, you know something has changed in the foundation of the candle wax and you need to reformulate to accommodate the change. Now, this is far better than knowing something's changed because your customers have complained about a poor performing candle, or worse, don't purchase from you again or don't even let you know that there was an issue in the first place. And then once we've worked out what our baseline wick and wax is in our candle vessel, then we can introduce the different fragrance oils. Now, it's not just a matter of testing one fragrance oil and then assuming that all fragrance oils will perform the same. If you listen to last Friday's podcast episode with Shay from iLux Candle and Soap Supplies, she went into detail about how different fragrance oils perform differently because of the different properties. So it's important to take that into consideration when you are creating your candles. And to be honest, if you think you've identified one candle wick, fragrance oil and wax combination and you think that it applies to all, that's actually a really dangerous way of thinking. You need to be testing each of the different fragrance oils because they behave differently, like I said. Some burn hot, some clog the wick, and some just won't work in the system, in the candle that you're trying to create. It's frustrating, I know. Testing can be really challenging and it can be very time consuming, but you need to make sure you're getting the safety and performance tested, even if the container and wax stay the same. And that's why it's important to test every fragrance oil and make sure you're finding the right percentage of fragrance oil per candle type that you're making. So bear in mind that also different fragrances might require different wicks or even a different wick series. So they might be a different size or a different type completely, even though you're using the same container and the same wax. The nature of candle making means everything added impacts everything added. Fragrances are relatively unpredictable, so make sure you're completing an entire test for every unique fragrance in your product line and when you buy a new batch of fragrance oil as well. So as you can tell, I'm really passionate about the testing process, and I know, as I said before, that it can be challenging, it can be time consuming, and it can be frustrating, and it can be seen as a costly way to start your business, but safety is always paramount, not only for yourself, but for the end user as well. The last thing that you would want to happen is that one of your candles has burnt down your customer's home or a friend's home because you haven't done your due diligence in testing that candle that you've created. And as I said before, insurance claims need to be supported by your documentation. So if you've got thorough documents as to what process you followed and all the different facts and figures about the wax, wicks, fragrance oil, candle, jar, etc., it'll be better for you to have that information written down rather than going ahead and not actually documenting your process. So as I said before, please don't skip or try to bypass the process of testing. If you have any questions about how to test or anything to do with testing, please send me a message on Instagram at Candle Business Coach and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Until then though, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I also wanted to mention in today's episode that I wrote a post yesterday on Instagram, so the 15th of May if you're in Australia, asking you for some feedback and some ideas about what you would love to see in the Candle Makers Collective or the monthly membership that I'm developing, because I want this to be a collaborative effort. I want to create something that will benefit you to help you grow and transform your candle business. So whether that's finding a business buddy or a business bestie through the Facebook group, finding the accountability that you need with others in the group as well, and also receiving support and coaching, as well as listening to expert guest speakers in the candle world as well as the business realm. That's what I want to create for you. So I would love to hear what else you would like to see as part of the membership. So send me a message on Instagram at Candle Business Coach. And if you're interested in joining the waitlist for the membership, you can click on the link in the show notes and you'll be able to pop your email in, and then I'll let you know as soon as more details come to light, which I'm super, super excited about. So thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thanks everyone for listening today. I hope this episode added value to your candle making journey. Check out the show notes for all the links mentioned throughout today's show, and please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for listening. Have a beautiful day.